today's web shop. Really appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedules to join us as we're going to review and discuss expectation alignment and really the key to smoother construction projects. So before we get started, just a couple of quick we've limited audio and video just to Heinrich and myself today. So don't worry if you're wondering why you can't unmute or turn your camera on. And if you are talking right now, nobody and no one's responding. No, you're being ignored. You're just being muted by design. But even though this is a presentation, we do want it to be interactive. So please feel free to jump in with questions or comments. You can also use the Q&A function. You'll find it on the far left of your drop-down bar under the More option, which is the three dots. We will have a dedicated Q&A session at the end, but if something pops up mid-session, we're happy to take pause and address it. And as I mentioned, we scheduled to spend about an hour together today, but I'm not sure we're going to need the full 60 minutes, but just in case conversation is flowing, we also didn't want to be rushed. And finally, don't stress about taking furious notes today. You're going to get today's slides plus a few other key takeaways of tools and templates that we will get into a bit more momentarily. So all you need to do right now is just relax, maybe finish your coffee before it gets cold, and we'll get started here. So here's what you can expect from today's session. And by the time we wrap up today, we hope that you're going to walk away with a clear blueprint for managing expectations with contractors more efficiently. You're also going to receive a pre-production form, which is a simple template to help you guys stay organized and align right from the start. We'll also be sharing AI prompts, which are going to be designed to streamline your communication with owners, tenants, and trades. We're also going to send you guys a progress update email template. You can use this to keep stakeholders informed. And finally, a copy of the slide deck and a recording of today's session as well, which will be available for download afterwards. So the idea here is to make every stage from pre-production all the way to project close less about chasing people for answers, really more about providing stakeholders with clear, timely information. So before we do a round of introductions, I wanted to turn everyone's attention to a little game or an offer that we're going to be running in today's session. So there will be a $200 Amazon gift card up for grabs, and the winner will be decided based on the best question that we're going to get during today's presentation. So as mentioned, we do have a dedicated Q&A at the end, but we invite you guys to ask all questions as the session progresses, and we'll do our best to address everything as it comes in. So with Black Friday and Christmas upcoming, huge opportunity here for you to cash in on that and get a head start with this gift card. So let the games begin. So before we dive into the content, just a quick round of introductions. I'm Stephen Bailey. I'm the Business Development Manager here at WCP Building Renewal. And joining me today is our Managing Partner, Heinrich Schumann. And together we've had the privilege of working on a wide range of projects across BC, from straightforward repainting jobs to some very complex envelope restorations. And the translation there is we've seen a lot go right, and we've certainly seen a few things go sideways, but both are going to be valuable stories for today's session. But Heinrich, just out of curiosity, how many projects would you say that you've done in your close to 20 years with WCP?
Oof, it's been thousands at this point, and I was looking at my picture there. I've got a bit more gray hair going on here, so something's happened in that time.
Well, I think we both need a new headshot because I'm looking a little younger than I am on camera today. But yeah, it's going to be Heinrich and I leading you guys today. We're really happy to be here, and I just wanted to ask, just maybe to get the Q&A fired up, where is everybody joining us from today? Maybe your name and the company that you guys are attending on behalf of. We would love to just get a little bit more acquainted through that Q&A function here. So a bit more about WCP, a little bit of context on who we are. I'm not going to get too far into this. This is not a dog and pony show, but I do think it's important that you guys are acquainted with us. So WCP Building Renewal, we were previously Wolfgang Commercial Painters. Sometimes that's a light bulb moment because Wolfgang was in business for 20 plus years, but over time, really our scope expanded well beyond just commercial painting, though that does remain a core part of what we do. But today, WC provides full building renewal services, helping property professionals like yourselves manage everything from waterproofing to restoration. So while our name has changed, coming up on almost 2 years ago, the goal has really stayed the same, which is just keeping buildings performing well for the long haul. And building renewal, this is a question we get. What is building renewal? And when we talk about that, and here's what that means to us, it's the restoration and revitalization of a building's exterior and interior surfaces. So that includes building restoration, waterproofing, and yes, painting. So really essentially everything that keeps your building protected, functional, and looking sharp. So really quick, just wanted to touch on some of our services. I'll start with the exterior. And they really cover big ticket items that most of you guys, I would imagine, face when you're approaching capital projects. But concrete, wood, metal restoration, commercial painting, membranes of all kinds, parkades, balconies, sealants and caulking, waterproofing. We're a Vancouver-based company. Waterproofing is obviously a well sought after service of ours. Brick repointing. We've done a ton of brick repointing over the course of the last 18 months or so. And of course, envelope inspections. So these are really the areas where small problems can turn into big costs if not evaluated and looked after properly. And then, yes, we do interior work. And in fact, given the time of year it is, we're shifting into our interior services in a big way right now. So it's not just the exterior we do. We do help our clients with interior services like remodels, drywall and texture repairs, painting, finish carpentry, wall coverings and protection. And we do design consultations as well. And right now, with a lot of our commercial partners, we're doing a lot of tenant improvement projects, which covers a wide range of services as well. So basically, if it touches the inside or the outside of your building, chances are that we've renewed it at some point. So before we dive in, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we do also offer lunch and learn sessions, which are tailored to your team's specific focus areas. So over the past couple of years, we've hosted, several dozen of these across the industry. They're really just a great way to bring your team together with some practical learning, real project insights, and, open discussion and dialogue. So if you're in charge of setting up lunch and learns for your office, we'd love to explore setting a session up for your team. And of course, we'll bring an awesome lunch for you guys. So, okay, that is the lightning round introduction. At this point, I'm going to hand things over to Heinrich. He's going to take us through the heart of today's session, which is going to show you guys how these services that we've just gone over translated to real world experiences and offer us the ability to provide insights on how to properly manage expectations and keep stakeholders aligned. So Heinrich, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, well, thank you, Stephen. And yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm glad to have you here. So yeah, I mean, Stephen mentioned it, but obviously we've been in business a long time, seen a lot. And so yeah, the intent around this is really to summarize some of our sort of key findings that help projects, in this case, construction-based projects, run effectively. And it really, when you drill it all down, it really does come down to good relationships and expectation alignment, right? And making sure that's happening all throughout the project. And I want to be clear, like this doesn't just apply to building renewal, building restoration style projects. It can be any construction projects. These tools, these key points are going to apply. And even more than that, I mean, I would say any projects. I think all of you would probably be nodding, be like, yeah, I mean, relationships are key. Making sure that expectations are aligned is key, in that. So we're going to look at it from the lens of construction, without a doubt. But really, these things apply across the board. I do want to say as well, I mean, if you just get one thing out of this that you can actually apply to, and maybe it's something that you've heard in the past and you're like, you know what, I know that, but I need to do more of that. Or it's something that's new, right? Regardless, if there's one thing that resonates, take that, And you can even zone out for the rest of the time, but know that you've gotten that one item that you can take and apply. That's what this is all about. Like that would make it deeply meaningful as a session overall. I also want to say, like, look, this is hard. Like, expectation alignment in theory is easy, but in practice it's quite challenging. I'll give a as we jump in, I'll give an example of this. We had a many years back now, but it really stuck with me. We had an interior renovation project starting up, and everything had been in this project had been approved. We had, a sign, we had a PO, everything. A line proposal. This was a strata in this case. So I was working with a key person on strata throughout, and they'd been great. And then we met up in this case for a pre-production meeting. Spoiler, we'll be talking about that. We met up for a pre-production meeting, and other council members were there, and things quickly unraveled. And the reason they unraveled is because other strata members felt that, hey, no, like we want a different scope of work here. Is this included? Is this included? This should be in there. And it quickly unraveled to the point that we really had to pause this. And I'm like, well, I mean, it sounds like there's some discussion that needs to be had to get on the same page. This is what we had agreed on, but we're not there. So we'll need to retool and figure this out. And luckily, we got it across the line, but things did need to shift because in this case, council wasn't aligned. I had a good alignment with one of the members there, who was the representative, but there was some other challenges there, and I'm sure some of you have experienced one or two council challenges in your past, and it's not just council; it can be any grouping of owners. You can see this, but that's just a small little example where there was some expectation misalignment, and that quickly bubbled up even before we'd started the project. So we're going to get into that, talk about that, and really what we can do, right? What are some tips and tools to make sure we're set up for success? Okay, let's jump in. So yeah, I mean, we love this lovely term alignment. This is key, and I think all of you are in some way seasoned managers. You think you'll know anything you've managed construction related or beyond. It's generally not the technical work that leads to the breakdown. It's misaligned expectations, just like I was giving an example of earlier. Like that generally is the real issue. When people aren't on the same page, a seemingly small issue can sometimes escalate. A delayed delivery or something like that can turn into a 3-week delay because no one had planned around it or, expected it. All sorts of things can happen. So our core message today is like, alignment isn't just one meeting. I think that's really important to note. It's across the entire project, alignment has to continue to be reassessed and pivoted. Change happens throughout a project, and alignment needs to continue to be there with all the key stakeholders at play. And with that in mind, I would want to ask, Stephen mentioned $200 gift card up for grabs, so with that in mind, as we're about to jump in here, what are one of your, tips or tools that you use to get alignment on a project? Any construction project. What's something that you do that you feel like, hey, this really makes a difference? If I do this on every project, that's great. Another thing I want to say as you're mulling that over, another thing I want to highlight here is, in your role, like obviously the contractors, the experts, you have the owners, you have the strata councils. We're going to get into that. You're not, managing every aspect of this project, but ensuring alignment is present and just prodding the appropriate parties in the right direction. That is an important deliverable, really important, even if it's just ensuring expectations are set and alignment is made. That's a really important distinction. And as we get into the three stakeholders, you'll see, I mean, often property managers, owners have a unique position here where they have a unique relationship with all the key stakeholders, and they can provide that. So with that in mind, let's introduce our stakeholders. Let's talk about them, who they are. All right. So the three key stakeholders for, your average construction project. I want to state there's usually more than this, or I should say sometimes there are more. You might have architects, you might have engineers, you might have other inspectors, you might have the certification agents, all sorts of, individuals that might pop up on projects. But for our purposes, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to hone in on kind of like three major groupings that generally pop up on any construction project. And here you go. We'll go through each one and we'll talk about, high level, what do they need in their projects? Like, what are they looking for overall? And this is not an exhaustive list. Let's be clear. There's lots of things. But first off, first grouping here is the owner, owners, and or strata council. So obviously some overlap, but at the end of the day, this grouping, of people needs to understand the why. Like, why are we doing this project in the first place? What's the value of it for our property? Like, what's the why? Really making sure that's clear. That's such an important question. Depreciation report said so. Okay, great. But like fully understanding what the implications are, if this project gets delayed 2 years, So the why is crucial to alignment across the board with this grouping. In addition, understanding the process. What's really going to be entailed on this project? What's that really going to look like? That's incredibly important. Okay, so that's that first grouping. Owners, as we'll just refer to them. Next, we have good old contractors, merry contractors, right? And what are contractors looking for throughout? Clarity, like clarity of scope, clear direction. Remember, contractors may be the expert in their field, in their trade, but they're not the expert of the property. They're not the expert of the unique needs and history of that property or the people associated with that property. They're not the experts there. And so they need direction and guidance on that. There might be that there's, some challenging owner, that they need to be aware of. Well, they need to be informed, right? It's incredibly helpful if they get that information proactively. On our end, it's always like, okay, great, thank you. So we just know and we can make sure we take action accordingly, right? So that's the contractor side. And then finally, you have tenants. So in tenants, it's a number of different forms. This could be obviously just the broader ownership group in a strata, right? It could be tenants in a rental property. It could be, guests or customers in a store style location or a hotel. Yeah, the whatever it is, these are all tenants of a sort, right? That's just a terming we're using, but it's a bucket. These are the people that are going to be impacted by the project, but aren't necessarily directly involved in it, right? Tenants want minimal disruptions. Really, they just want to continue their day-to-day lives. They want to make sure that they are not impacted by things, or the impact is minimal. And the key to that is they're clearly communicated with, clearly and concisely, right? So, that could look like messages via notices that are distributed electronically, that are distributed in person. And of course, you've probably all seen some noticing looks like War and Peace, paragraph after paragraph after paragraph, and some noticing is crisp and clear. And we remember, people read less than ever. The attention spans are, I think we can all agree, are reduced a little bit in our current age. So, messaging needs to be reflective of that and make sure that those who matter in this case, the tenants, are reading that. So just a little anecdote there that's incredibly important. At the end of the day, each of these groups need different information, right? And like I'd mentioned earlier, your role in this is to just make sure that all of them are getting this information, just translating it to their particular language to ensure that happens, to get to our glorious alignment across all stakeholders. Okay, let's dive in. So, one thing to discuss is this mentality toward contractors that I think is just an important thing to linger on for a moment. And that's, I think it can be easy to look at contractors as vendors, just like, hey, you know what? They're vendors. They're really like a vending machine, like put in money, get out service, or experience. Like put in money, do that. And you just like, that's sort of the approach. And look, understandable, right? You just want to kind of like very transactional. Let's go through the process. we're going to encourage, and this is from our many years, we're going to encourage that to shift that to a partnership mentality, right? Because partners, if contractors are, treated as partners, they are going to help at a whole other level to problem solve around the project. They're going to step up in a way that otherwise they might not. They're going to they're really going to feel connected in a different way. And so how do you create this? How do you foster this difference? And I think it comes down to a few things. One is like, hey, selecting the right contractor. Like that's pretty damn important, as I think we all know. So important that we have a whole web shop dedicated to it, right? And presented on it in the past. It may be our most popular web shop. And it's something we've actually been presenting on for years because it's such an important piece. So that goes without saying, right? And that's a whole other drop down. But also, and this can be done regardless, is fostering a relationship with the contractor, right? And of course, that's reciprocal. They need to do the same. And this relationship doesn't need to be intense. You don't need to know everything about their kids and so forth, but just fostering a relationship, having a connection. It's so easy to just do everything via email, and leave it at that. But like having some level of connection, I think we all intuitively know it makes it easier. Both sides will step up more. Both sides have more skin in the game because they feel like there's a meaningful connection, even at a simple level. They feel like there's a meaningful connection that actually entices them and makes them want to be like, hey, I want to make sure this project goes incredibly well. And also, if things go sideways, if there's a bit of a relationship there or a great relationship there, it's so much easier now to
Mhm.
engage in it. It completely changes the dynamic, right? And then that shift, it's, stating there at the bottom, like just making sure then like relationship is fostered and involving contractors early on, to leverage their expertise to ensure projects go smoothly. Okay, so that's a little bit about that really important piece. Now we're going to dive into our steps, specifically our phases throughout a project. So what we're going to do here is look at the three major phases of a project. And for each phase, we're going to circle again back in with our stakeholders, our three key stakeholders, and dive into what's really important to them. Okay. So pre-production phase. What is that? What does that entail? Well, this is, a project has now been, awarded, POs have been issued, time to start the project. That's the pre-production phase itself, right? And this goes a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different ways that it's actually initiated. And we'll get into a best practice for that. Spoiler, it's a pre-production meeting, and
Mhm.
and that's really important. But let's get into, for each phase or each stakeholder, what matters most and why. Okay. So first of all, we have owners. Owners here, they just want to be really clear on what are the goals of this, how's it going to roll out as a project overall. Budgets. I mean, the owners are signing the checks at the end of the day, right? So they want to be really clear on, great, we have a clear budget. What are the overages, if any, that are going to happen? How are we dealing with change orders? What's the plan if change orders come up, right? Should change orders come up on this project? All those things need to be clear at this pre-production phase. Otherwise, you're going to have frustrated and misaligned owners. So that's a massive one. And then tolerances. Look, I'll give you a great example of this to help illustrate. We worked on a hotel project a couple of years back, and we were doing a significant amount of concrete restoration on this project. So much so that we required jackhammering. Well, you can imagine in a hotel, jackhammering and guests doesn't go super well together. So their tolerance for that was extremely low, right? Like they had real concerns about that. And so lots of discussion was had, impeccable communication strategy, from via us and then the hotel staff to their guests needed to be fostered, an ongoing communication to make sure that there was good alignment. They still got complaints, but they'd done everything they could to make sure they'd set good expectations for everybody so that, this low tolerance of, in this case, jackhammering noise was addressed. And of course, we worked within boundaries. We weren't doing things too early in the morning. We were making sure it was at reasonable times of day, et cetera, et cetera. Construction can be messy, right? Construction can be loud, literally, it can be impactful, right? But what we do, how we communicate, that's what's going to minimize the issues. right? So that's a great example there, and that's owners. Moving over to contractors. Contractors, need clear scope. Even if they've helped define the scope, they need to make sure that and know that everybody's on the same page. I used that example earlier with that interior renovation that went sideways before it even started, right? Because some of the owners were not aligned on things. They need to make sure that their assumptions and the assumptions of owners and even tenants are aligned and on the same page. Like that's really, really important. They need to be aware. I'd spoken of this earlier. They need to be aware of any concerns or issues or troubling tenants, right? Or problems on the building. They don't know the building in the same way you or tenants or owners do, right? So they need to be brought into the loop so they can, make appropriate decisions and the project moves forward smoothly, right? And finally, staging, just a really important piece, just making sure that they have an area that's aligned to set up on this project. Sometimes staging is nil or minimal. Sometimes it's significant if it's a sizable project, right? Finally, we have tenants. Tenants just need to make sure they have as much awareness as possible of disruptions. I use that hotel example to kind of help illustrate that. The more disruption, probably the more notice they need. Sometimes there's very minimal disruption and they just need to be aware this is going to be happening and that's fine. But sometimes we're getting onto their balconies, sometimes jackhammering's happening. It's going to be really significant. The communication strategy with tenants is crucial here in this pre-production phase and making sure there's good alignment on how that's going to be expressed and done. So there we go, a few key things in the pre-production phase among our stakeholders. The best practice here, and we've spoken about this in a previous web shop as well, the pre-production meeting. Like this is really the key piece that's going to set you up for success here. What does that look like? We're not going to go into the nuances and depths of this, but what that really looks like is making sure that these key stakeholders and any others come together on site and get aligned, right? Get on the same page, get aligned, make sure logistics, dates, staging, all sorts of other things are on the same page, right? And everybody's discussed any potential hiccups. Are there change orders? Have those been talked about, potentially? Have those been addressed? Et cetera, et cetera. All of those things get aligned in person. It also helps build a bit of a relationship, which is always important, right? So that's a really crucial step here at this pre-production phase. You have that meeting on site, get aligned. This project is going to move forward more smoothly. So that's pre-production phase.
Heinrich, just to linger on the phase one sort of pre-production before we move into phase two production. We had a question come in from Debbie Lamberger from Advantage Property Management. Debbie, thanks so much for joining us. But question is, I think it has to do with the pre-production phase. So I figured we could linger on it for a sec. But
Yeah.
The question that comes in is, what are the reasonable expectations from the quoting process to button up regarding communications? Is it reports? Is it photos? What is kind of associated with that? So I figured I'd put you on the spot for that one.
No, it's great. And my cheeky answer is check out our web shop, how to select the right contractor. That answers all of those questions. I think we could find the download. I think it's somewhere out there that like it does this in detail. The bottom line is, yeah, like really those expectations should be set in the quoting process. It's really important that there's no or the minimum number of surprises as we move to pre-production. That's absolutely crucial. So that can be set in the quoting process with a good project specification, and we speak about that in the web shop, like having a project specification that if you have multiple contractors bidding, that they're all aligned on, and they've really even built into their proposals. It's like, okay, all of these needs have been documented, by the tenants, by the owners, by you, they've all been specified there. So they know, they being the contractors, know what they're getting into. And they've already built the proposal that's now been approved ahead of time with that in mind. So really important. Great question, because it's such an important step. And it goes back to even before the project starts, setting good expectations.
Nice. Right on.
All right. On to the production phase. So look, we're in it now, right? Pre-production, we've done good work. We've had that pre-production meeting, which is fantastic. Everybody's on the same page. Away we go, right? We're in the midst of production now. So same thing, what is important for each of our stakeholders through this process and why? So our owners, right? Our owners, most importantly, they just want to make sure they're watching, right? They just want to make sure that they have regular updates on the project, and that, spoiler, surprise, it's right there. Progress updates are absolutely the most important thing that can happen in this phase, right? Why? Because everybody, just naturally starts to expect the worst or doesn't know what's happening when there aren't regular updates throughout the project, right? Who's going to send those projects? Probably the contractor. And that expectation should be set at the pre-production phase or even earlier than that to make sure everybody's on the same page there. But yeah, again, owners are watching, right? They hear nothing, they're going to expect the worst, they're going to be concerned. So we don't want to have, these quiet periods where everybody's starting to say, what's happening here, right? So that's on the owner's front. Also speaking about like decision support. So say the contractor is sending an update and they're, saying, hey, this change order or this decision needs to happen, that's come up, whether it's a specific material or, hey, how would you like us to proceed forward on here? Making sure that they're getting the support on making that decision, i.e. the context, is incredibly important. It might even be, if it's a complex enough project, it might even require a meeting on site, to actually go through and just dialogue on that. But really important that that's provided, for owners throughout the process. Next, you have your contractors. And look, contractors are in it. They're trying to do everything they can to get this project across the line effectively, and make sure it's dialed in. Contractors need rapid communication. We talk about rapid communication. We're all mindful of it. But, if there's any surprises, any things, or contractors need an answer on something, they're on site. They're going through the process. They're working on the job. They need a quick answer, so they can pivot accordingly for anything that pops up. Decisions can't wait. So really making sure that there's a appropriate responsiveness is really crucial. We've been on the receiving end many times of like, this is a really important decision and the entire project stalls, because we don't have an answer on it, because we're waiting on it. And that can be really problematic, so really important on the contractor front during the production phase. And finally, you have your tenants. Well, yeah, same thing, but they're in it now. They just need to feel informed, right? And they don't want surprises. So, great example of this, tenants might be unaffected because let's say this is a townhouse complex. There's a bunch of different phases to the townhouse complex. They haven't even seen the contractors. And suddenly contractors are on their building and they're like, what's happening? They need to make sure they're informed. So maybe it's a phased noticing process to, ensure that each, block along the way is informed, or something else to make sure that, they're not surprised. That's really going to be important, for tenants. So the best practice here, the thing that matters the most, is progress updates. It can be brief, and we're going to be sending an example of that, that you can use, that you can share with contractors, that you can even leverage yourself potentially, but that they're going to, we have progress updates that are sent out on an ongoing basis. This could be weekly. This could be at each phase of the project as it goes through, just informing all stakeholders where things are at, any action items, decisions that need to be made, and upcoming plans for progress along the way. Just simple items like that, basic bullet points, a few sentences go, maybe a picture or two goes so far, to making sure everybody stays, that magical word, aligned. Okay, quick break, just a quick moment before we move on to the next phase. Just again a reminder, and we already had one. I think we have a few others, but questions. Keep firing those questions in. If there's anything that pops up along these as I'm talking that you're like, that's interesting, fire it in there, right? Let us know, because gift card up for grabs. We want to
see questions. So far a couple questions, but definitely the gift card is very much up for grabs. So yeah, keep those coming in.
Good. Okay, final phase. So post-production, here we go. So we are reaching the end. We've kind of reached that substantial completion phase of the project. Great. Now what? What does each particular stakeholder, what are they looking for? What do they need as we reach this conclusion? Well, for owners, I mean, the tension probably up here a little bit. They're starting to think, okay, are we across the line? Are there any unresolved deficiencies? They're maybe starting to think about warranties, maintenance plans, the future, provided things are moving along smoothly. So they want to make sure that there's just real clarity for closure. Like the project's going to get concluded. There's a timeline that's clear and aligned for when that's going to happen. I think we've all felt the pain of a construction project or any project, but a construction project's the classic, going on way too long. It's like it seems like it's over, and then nope, 3 weeks of delays on X, Y, and Z for whatever reason. So that's a real pain point and something that owners want to have clarity on. Next, you have the contractors. Look, contractors are eager to wrap up. Obviously, they want to wrap this up, but they want to do it in a professional manner, right? If you have the right contractor, that's always key, right? They want to do it in a professional manner. They want things wrapped up. They want to take pride in their work, right? And they want to have a happy client at the end of the day, or happy clients. That's really important. So they just need to make sure that, there's alignment for contractors as well, so that they can do what they need to do to wrap up effectively at the end. And then finally, you have tenants. They just want to know, the project's done. It's no longer there's an impact for them. And they want to know their building or their property is better. They want to be clear that great, we can go back to normal. Our lives are back to normal. And if this was all worth it, there's a reason this is worth it. They may have skin in the game. They may be paying towards this. It could be a special levy, right? But even if not, even if they're just guests in a hotel, they want to be like, oh, wow, this is awesome. Like this is an impressive change. So that's the tenant piece. In terms of best practices here, having a final inspection meeting is so important. Final inspection meeting, again, it's bringing all your stakeholders together, getting everybody aligned and on the same page, and walking through and actually dialoguing. So are there any deficiencies, that haven't been addressed yet? Again, we have a whole web shop on this because of the importance of this, but are there any deficiencies that need to be addressed? Are there any other areas that need to have the loop closed, and getting aligned on timeframes here, making sure that everybody is clear what the path looks like to demobilize on this and officially close the project out. So all stakeholders should be at that meeting. It's such an important one. And for anybody saying, oh man, another meeting, this is one that's really key to be at, right? You yourself in a property management style capacity may or may not be there, depending on the project, but you certainly want to ensure that it happens if you're not there. Okay, great. Let's move on to what if it all falls apart? So we've done such good work all throughout, but despite all your best efforts, it all falls apart. Like what happens? Something goes sideways, somebody's frustrated, there's some issue. These things happen. They happen in construction, they happen in life, right? On any project. The key is how you engage with it, we're gonna say it again, they're gonna sound like kind of a broken record, but the way to get alignment again is to get everybody, in this case in a construction project, on site to talk it through, to have really clear expectations, to have really clear next steps on what's going to be done. It's really that simple and that hard. Yes, it takes time to go to site and do this, but the alternative is endless emails, calls, WhatsApps, text messages, trying to resolve this thing when really, everybody coming in person often lowers the hostility, lowers the misalignment, the challenge in communication, and just says, hey, let's figure out how to make this thing work. Let's deal with the issue or issues at hand and get this across the line. So simple but effective, making sure that happens. And that's a simple, like, okay, we got an issue. Let's just meet and resolve this so we can move this thing forward. All right. With that, Stephen, back to you.
Great. Thanks, Heinrich. So, this comes up. It isn't necessarily hesitation, but it does come up. What if I already have trusted trades, right? Well, that's a fair point. Many of you already have trusted trades or contractors you've worked with for years, and that is fantastic. And honestly, that is the goal, right? But here's the thing, even with trusted trades, alignment is still critical. Every project is going to be different, right? The building is different, the scope is different, the conditions are going to be different. So Your trades are still going to need project specific direction to make sure everyone's clear on expectations from the start. Think of it like this. Like if you have a great pilot, you still need a flight plan before you guys are taking off, right? So I think it's also worth asking, are your trades scaling with your portfolio? Are they elevating your process, right? Or are they just repeating what's kind of worked before? So the best partnerships grow with you. So even if you've got a great relationship, alignment keeps everyone moving in the same direction and ensures consistency sort of across all of your projects. And I am seeing some great questions come in. We're just going to get in very briefly. I'm going to shift gears to AI, but we are going to get into some Q&A. So if any questions are coming up, guys, feel free to leverage that Q&A function, and we'll be getting that momentarily. But yeah, like I said, shifting gears for a second, let's talk AI, okay? Question for the audience, okay? And remember, $200 Amazon gift card is on the line, maybe the easiest $200 Amazon gift card you could possibly win. But who here that's joining us on the call is already using AI in some form? Okay, and don't worry, this is a safe space. There's no judgment. Even if your answer is, well, yeah, I use ChatGPT to help me write emails sometimes, right? That's totally okay. The additional question is, what platform do you prefer to use? Is it ChatGPT? Is it Gemini, Copilot, or is it something else, right? Here's the thing. If you think you're not using AI, you probably are. The next time you Google something and a box pops up at the top with a pre-written answer, that's Gemini, right? That's AI already at work in your day-to-day. So keep in mind, I know when I mention AI, some people get a little bit skittish, but really the goal here is not to replace people or overcomplicate your workflow. It is to use AI as a shortcut to clarity. So on the screen here, we have an example prompt we can use. And note, we will be sending you an AI prompt library in the resources we send to you guys after the session. But this is something you could use, right? I'm managing a project type. This is when you would get as detailed as you can with the project type with scope details. Again, get as detailed as you can. And then I need to update whatever stakeholder, is it owner, tenant, trade, on whatever the issue, progress, or the change might be. Please write a clear professional summary with options, right? This prompt is going to spit out something that you're able to then copy, paste, make a couple of tweaks, and then you can fire it out. The one thing I would say here, just to linger on it for a sec, make sure that it's specifically tailored to the stakeholder you're sending it to. So the same email you're going to send your owners, you're probably not going to send to your tenants, and you're not going to send to your trades. There's going to be sort of a variety of different details you're going to want to address, right? But within seconds, it's going to draft a polished update that you can tweak and then you can send. So it's going to be perfect for progress summaries, tenant notices, or even explaining a change order, all in plain language, right? I like to think of AI almost as having like a communications assistant who's just always available, right? And it's not doing your job for you. It's about helping you do it faster and to do it just a little bit easier. Okay. So we are going to get to some Q&A. I'm seeing the Q&A box start to heat up a little bit, which is always nice to see. We'll get to that in a moment. But before we do, I just wanted to remind you guys the resources from today's session you'll be leaving with. So a pre-production form that you guys are going to be able to use to kick off your next project right away. Okay, this is going to help align contractors, owners, and tenants before work even begins. We just spoke to AI, so we're going to be actually sharing with you guys an AI prompt library. It should just be good, like a good sort of foundational thing to get you guys started, but it's going to be ready to use, sort of fill in the blank prompts that you can copy into your preferred AI platform. And then it's going to help you to simplify your communications, right? And then we're going to send you a sample progress update template. That way you'll be able to frame this for project updates clearly and consistently. And then, of course, we're going to be sending you guys the slide deck that we just went through to reference any of the ideas or tools that we covered, and as well as recording of this session. So really the goal here that we're trying to do, everything is designed in hopes of making your day-to-day a little bit easier and to help you get through projects with fewer surprises and smoother communication. Okay. So now We've got about 15 minutes left together. Not sure we're going to need the full 15. However, I do see some questions coming in, so I do want to address them, right? So I'm going to go in order as they came in. So this one, Heinrich, I actually wanted to, open the dialogue up because it came in as well from Debbie, and she had mentioned, as strata managers, we need to make sure that council understands that we are admin. We are not project managers. And before I let you answer, I just wanted to note we do actually have a full session on what project management looks like from the viewpoint and the lens of a property professional or a property manager. But Heinrich, I just wanted to note, what you may say to that question.
Yeah, no, it comes up often. It really does. And I see tensions between in this case strata managers and stratas on a regular basis on this, where you're frustrated stratas be like, well, our property manager should have caught this or figured this out. And then you have, strata managers like, this is not our responsibility. Like, we made it clear this is not our responsibility. So it's an ongoing issue. There again, great example of expectation misalignment, right? Great example of where, both parties are not on the same page as to what is actually going to be provided, right? So how can that be rectified? Just, that could be dealt with even prior to the pre-production meeting, but very much at a pre-production meeting, making really clear what roles are for each player, including the property manager, right? What is their role in this project and what is it not? For the contractor, what about them? For the strata representative, maybe a council member, what's their role in this, right? And being really clear on that. And then even documenting that, right? Like really clear and reiterating that, that is going to help and make clear, who is responsible for what. And if there's that little misalignment between council, say, and the strata manager on their roles, let's have that conversation right now. Let's do that prior to getting into the project or ahead of time so there's no issues. So,
No, yeah, I couldn't agree more. So just shifting gears a little bit, this one came in from John Wong. John, thanks for joining us today. So the question, Heinrich, is how do you ensure that deficiencies are completed in a timely manner? And then additionally, how do you motivate contractors to provide the required O&M and as a built drawings in a timely manner?
yeah. No, good questions. Yeah, so in terms of deficiencies, is a classic challenging one, what's the worst case scenario or a bad case scenario? Project's finishing, trade moves on to another job, lingers on the last few deficiencies, and it just kind of drags on. So what can you do? Same thing. How do we get aligned expectations? Well, if you're doing that final walk around, it's a great tool face to face to get on the same page and be like, great, we have these few final deficiencies, if there are any. When are they going to be done by? And everybody agrees on that. Like, yep, what's a realistic time frame for these to be done by? They want to be done as quickly as possible. Agreed date that then is documented via email and on the same page. So that is enormously important, making sure that that's the case, because if that is done, surprise, surprise, if you've got the right contractor, they'll deliver, right? And if they can't deliver for whatever reason, or things pop up, they'll tell you why. The thing that leads to problems is when there's no clarity on timeframes. It's like, okay, so you're going to get those deficiencies done, great, and then what? Then they just kind of linger because there's nothing clear, So having clarity and even having the contractors set that expectation themselves, and then you either agreeing or saying like, oh, that seems pretty tight, or that's too long, like having that dialogue is really important on that front. So that's that piece. In terms of making sure they provide the proper documentation at the end, it's really the same answer. It's about making sure that there's that expectation set.
Mm-hmm.
I would set that expectation earlier in the project even. You could set that expectation even during the bidding stage. You can be like, this is what we expect or would like to see at the end of the project. That can be done right then. And we've seen some great project specifications that get sent out that have that documentation in there, right? Be like expectations at the end. This is what it looks like. If not, then it can be done any phase throughout the project at the pre-production, or worst case scenario at the final inspection. Same thing, just set the expectations, what's going to be provided, what's going to be sent out, and then it does get sent out, right? If it's not talked about, if it's not dialogued, then there's no alignment. It's a toss-up whether that's going to happen. So yeah, great questions.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, excellent question, John. Thank you so much for asking that one. So this next one kind of pulls us back to the whole communication piece. This one came in from an anonymous attendee, so I can't shout them out by name. But the question really was like, what's the best way to communicate? Like, is it a site meeting, video communication? And I think look at like, and Heinrich, you can follow up on this one, but COVID now seems like a bad dream. But I think what it did do is make us realize the value of face-to-face interaction and not just phone call, video call. So I would say that the best communication is always going to happen in person. Now, is that always going to be possible? No, unfortunately not. There's a multitude of reasons for that, whether it's busy schedules, um, location of the site. Perhaps you're doing a project in the interior and you can't just teleport there, unfortunately. So I would say that the best method of communication is going to be in person always. However, there is technology at our disposal which allows you to do other types of communication like video, like we're doing right now. But I think the overarching goal is that the communication is happening, right? The worst thing that could happen is that there's no sort of touch base happening. Hey, I'm not clear on something, and you're sending an email into the ether and you're not getting anything responded on it. Like, make sure that there's those key critical touch points happening sort of throughout the project. But yeah, Heinrich, not sure if there's anything you wanted to add to that.
In terms of the best way to communicate.
Yeah.
Yeah, job meeting or video. Yeah, I mean, we talk about this, and like we talk about everything in another web shop. But we talk about this. The best on the clear answer is the best is in person. Bar none. That is the best way to communicate. It breaks down the barriers of technology, and it ensures that everybody gets to on the same page. All that said, I mean, I think increasingly we find we're like, ugh, I have to drive X amount of time through traffic, get there, do this, go through the process. So if it's the difference between not having the meeting, versus doing it via, leveraging all the great means we have via technology, then do it that way. And Stephen talked about remote. We do lots of remote projects. I'm not flying up to, we did a project in Houston, BC. I don't even know if anybody knows where Houston, BC is. I didn't before the project. It's a tiny town in the middle of BC. We did it. We did like their main mall there, and I did that pre-production meeting via technology. Right, that was great. It worked out. We went through that process. So there was a time and place for it, but generally, that in person is always going to be a bit better.
Yeah. So I think we got time for one more before we depart here. This one just has to do almost with like project updates and reporting. And I mean, we've kind of spoken to it, but really this I think just speaks to our process, Heinrich. But what type of reports, updates are we sending out throughout the project? In those updates, are we typically providing like what cadence? Is it on progress, budgeting, pictures? Like what's kind of included with that?
Yeah. Well, I'll say a couple things. I mean, for one thing, I mean, the regular project updates are going to be key, right? We like to, right at the onset, we like to do the pre-production meeting, document it, and send that out. If everything's, all the best practices are being followed, send out the aligned data. I saw Debbie had a little comment in there, and I totally agree with it. It's like everything should be documented via email, 100%. If I haven't said that enough, I will say it again. Document what's discussed at a meeting via email, right? So everybody's on the same page. Otherwise, it becomes a he said, she said. Oh no, didn't we talk about this? No, we didn't. Yeah, we did. We totally did. If it's documented via email, great. So that's really important. But yeah, so pre-production phase, we'll document that via email, right? Send that out, make sure all the parties are aligned, right? And that's just a great tool to make sure that phone numbers and everything is just all in one place. During the project itself, there'll be regular project updates. We used to call them weekly updates. They may be more or less often than weekly, dependent on the phase of the project. So that's really how we look at it now. Project updates, and we do it after each phase in the project when it's relevant to provide an update. So that's what it's going to look like. And then at the end of the project, there's a few pieces of communication. There's that final piece, that final update, just letting people know that the project's complete. And then there's the project documentation. We send through a full package at the end, that's going to include things like warranty information, maintenance information, how to maintain the property specifically. We've built out some really fun and quality guides on that, as well as product information, so making sure that the products that were used are all there and documented, so you have that referenced. So those are some of the reports that we like to use on projects.
Right on. Okay, well, we're about 4 minutes from 11:30 here. So great questions, guys. Insightful stuff. Really, really appreciate it. As mentioned, we'll be sending a lot of resources to you guys after the fact. So we invite you guys, questions may come up after the session. We're obviously open and happy to continue the dialogue. So don't feel like if you've missed something, you've missed out entirely. We're happy to follow up with you guys. But yeah, I mean, on that note, we really appreciate you guys taking some time out of your busy schedules to join us. We hope that you guys were able to take some things away from the web shop today. And we will look forward to continuing the conversation and chatting to you guys again really soon. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Good engagement. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Okay, we'll talk to you soon.